I am clicking record because there's always some good stuff that happens now.
As always.
You know what? I have had the best conversations before anybody clicks record. And I'm like, man, I wish I had this stuff on recording. And then at the end, we won't mention anything, but we always get some really cool stuff. And everybody's like, even Alex goes, I had to wait till we're off recording. I was like, I'm sorry, but we still were.
Everyone always does it. I like it because before Twitch, we start by like having a chit chat. We have like 10-minute buffer so people can get online, like make sure we can share screens off the VPN, etc. But then I started doing a dad joke, which I stole from someone else who does it on Twitch. But the reactions to the dad jokes, I wish I could also record just to have them because they're always really bad, but it does make people laugh.
Wait a second. Tell me a dad joke.
I can't think. I like said it and now I'm like, I can't think of anything. Should I read them off something? What wait,
I'll wait.
There's like I've gone through so many. There was one about what's blue and doesn't weigh very much.
I don't know.
Light blue.
Excuse me. I'll put that in my database.
Oh God. This is all this is going to be is just like that dad jokes back and forth.
Actually, really, is that what we came on to record? You know what? I think that's what we came on to do. We're just going to tell dad jokes a little bit.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, I got one for you. My son told it to me the other day. You know who Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is, right? The Rock?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Just checking. So what happens when you touch Dwayne's backside or The Rock's backside?
I don't know. What happened?
You've hit rock bottom.
Oh no. No. As you started saying it, I was like, I can see where this is going. Oh gosh, I'm gonna steal that. That's gonna go in Thursday's show.
That you should. You know what? I'll be all watching. Just drop me a note on Chime and say, hey, listen, John, I'm about to drop that. You need to listen to this. I'm going.
Oh no, but the problem is it's in the pre-chat, so it never gets recorded.
Oh man. Okay, you gotta let me know the reaction for that.
Oh yeah, it's my colleague Matty, and he's probably just going to be like, "I'm disappointed in you." I feel that's the vibe he's going to give me.
Okay, Steph. Today we're going to talk. We actually are going to talk about something today. I'm not. Dad jokes would have been pretty cool if I came prepared. This would have been a very humorous one. I'm not sure how it would have made.
We could have had like an hour of just dad jokes. Next time.
Okay. We'll plan that on there. I will bring mine, you bring yours, and we can go. Oh, you know what we should do? One of those recordings where you have a mouthful of water and you do that. Wait a second. Can we do that now? Can we take a quick?
No. I need to cover my monitors in like coating so they don't get ruined. Have you seen the Tortilla
right here?
wrap one?
I'm gonna have a bucket.
Have you seen the wrap one of this?
No.
Okay, so you like get a mouthful of water and then you hit your partner with like a
yeah, that I've seen.
That is just, I want to try it with my friends, but they don't want to do it.
My daughter and her best friend did it at our camping trip. So they yeah, we had to buy tortillas specifically for this. And it like whacked it and like broke the tortilla. Oh, yes, I've seen that.
Them so hard.
Did you see the one with The Rock and Kevin Hart?
No.
Oh, you gotta go watch. You have to watch that. Kevin, like literally on. I don't know how this had to be a fake rap because he smacked him so hard it didn't even break. I would have been gripping that and like. Oh my God. Brilliant. Okay, next time we're doing that. We're going to do that as the intro to whatever we're
Just
talking
do a
about.
reinvent.
Oh, yes. Okay, I'm writing that down. We're going to, since we're doing a lot of live streams.
Yeah. It's going to either be like the best decision we make or the worst decision we make. One of the two.
I'm guaranteeing a lot of views, whether it's good or bad. I almost.
I'm going to put my drinks away. This is dangerous.
Oh my God. We didn't even get started yet. I'm so glad I'm recording all this. Anyway.
Okay, let's go. What we're talking about?
First of all, everybody join me in welcoming Steph Gooch, commercial architect at AWS. Oh, Steph, thanks for joining the show. Wait a second. We're in this like 10 minutes already, and I'm doing the intro.
I know, right? I've just literally had to wipe a tear out of my eye because I'm crying. Thank you for having me back. I loved last time. So this is starting with a whole different energy and I'm loving it.
Oh, you know what? It is Monday and I needed to definitely pick me up. This is definitely, my cheeks are hurting. Oh my God. All right. Woo. I need to turn on the fan.
Okay. We're ready.
All right. Let's get down to bed. I'm sorry.
So the problem is the more you laugh, I'm going to laugh. So
are you
water from my gorgeous Optics branded cup that Alex made me.
And, I saw that. That's pretty good. Don't spit any of that out. All right.
Oh, no.
Okay. Let's get to it. Today I wanted to talk with everybody a little bit off the cusp. I've been putting out some AWS quick savings or savings quick tips, right? And I've been posting them out there, and these are really meant for literally 1 to 2 minutes on how you can just do some savings in AWS. I want to take a little bit of a step back, and I want to talk about folks that are starting out in AWS, startups creating their first account. What are some of the things that you recommend them doing immediately when they get their account set up before they say, oh, listen, I want to deploy out this whole new website, 3-tier infrastructure with backups and all this other stuff?
So there's a couple of things, and this is very timely. I posted on LinkedIn about this kind of concept recently, like what do you do at the start? Because we're doing a blog series on the CFM blog about this topic, following the 4 pillars of CFM at AWS. And so there was a whole debate about whether you start with accounts or you start with costs. And so the consensus was you have to start with the cost and use report. So day one, set it up. It's like the first thing you should do because it's hard to go and get the data retroactively. So number one, go and enable your cost and use report in your billing account. And hopefully that will be in an organization account. And that's like step 2 is turn your account into an organization, because that gives you access to a lot of control when you expand over lots of linked accounts and things like policies and tag policies. And you can use services like Control Tower to expand. So number 1 and number 2. Number 1, create the care. Number 2, create an organization.
Wait a second. I think I heard the chicken before the egg before the chicken. I'm not sure.
I know. I had such a
debate. You just
debate.
said the cost and usage, and then you open your account, your billing account. And I think you're right. The very first thing I always tell people to do is set up your cart, right? You know, set this up, and then you can still set up the organization and how you want the structure, but always that first. It's not like setting it up and you can't do one without the other. You can always go back and do one versus the other, or organize things. Yeah. Even if you sit down and you map out, I want 12 accounts. Here's the 12 accounts. How do I want to deploy these accounts? Well, before you even start with those accounts is how are you going to control the cost in all those accounts or visualize the cost? So I'm right there with you. The CUR has to be set up first.
Also, the way you set it up. So a lot of people, again, recently have been reaching out and they're saying, someone actually messaged me, I think yesterday, saying, oh, I've been trying to find out how I find a singular database that's costing me money or a tag connected to it. And they hadn't actually enabled the CUR to be set up in like the right format. So a couple of things to always know, this is in the documentation, but I really urge people to do it because they often see things like CSV as their choice of format because they're used to CSV, but we don't want that for this situation. We want to choose Parquet format. We want to overwrite the report, have resource IDs, and have it running for every hour. They're like the 4 things that people should always make sure that they select because there's lots of different options. But to get the best of it, that's what I recommend.
Wow, that's some really good information because I think I've always set up mine as a CSV. That's just typical. I want to download it, right? And I'm going to open it up in my spreadsheet. And I want to
John, did you not listen to Alex's podcast?
Yeah,
Don't. You were there. Don't print it out.
I know. That's I always get a little sarcastic. Sorry. But exactly. And that's actually some good information really to tell them how to do it and set it up. You did indicate tagging. We will talk about tagging in a few moments because I know there's some pluses, minuses, or what you should and shouldn't do with tagging. I've got my curse set up. What's the next thing you recommend?
So following that, I would make sure that you have access to it in Athena, which is kind of like following that. And there's a handy CloudFormation template which gets put into your S3 bucket where your cur is, which will deploy out a crawler in a CloudFormation stack that will enable you to update your table in Athena, which means that, say, for example, when you first start your account, you haven't bought any savings plans or reserved instances, there will be no columns in your cur then. But then you go and you go buy some savings plans to cover your compute. And then you want those columns to be added into your cur. So a crawler needs to go through and pick up that new data. So unless you do that, you won't see the new columns in your table. So make sure you deploy that. And then following that, I mean, unless you want to jump in.
No, actually, well, the only thing I was going to say, can you send me a link to that document and the CloudFormation template? That is pretty cool because I didn't even think about that, where the columns were added if you didn't have it already. And now I need to update my database for it. If I'm not doing this automatically, then I'm not visualizing it.
Yeah, there is a static SQL file in there, which is the table that you can just deploy into Athena, or there's the CloudFormation, which gets the crawler. I always opt for the crawler option because then you don't need to do anything. And it means that when new data and new partitions are added, so partitions, just for extra information, when you look into your cur is going to be split up by like month and year. And so if you go into that, every partition that's added, your table needs to kind of be refreshed, and the crawler will do that for you.
Nice. Now, when you said you're setting up the cur, you mentioned to overwrite it. Is it because it's going to the S3 and then it's going to Athena and then the data is not there? Or what were you talking about? Because here I'm envisioning, and those who are listening are like, oh, why am I overwriting the data? I want to save this hour over hour.
So this is the bit I'm not going to say I know this 100%, but I know that there's a tick box in there that you do. And I think the concept is that if you don't overwrite it, you'll get so day one, you'll get day one. Day two, you'll get day one and day two. Day three, you'll get 1, 2, and 3. Whereas if you overwrite it, it will be day one, then just 1 and 2, then just 1, 2, 3. So it overwrites the file so you don't keep duplicates of multiple days. I think that's right. But we can always check.
Yeah, I think I'll test that out. Okay, Steph, after I've done my cur, I've set this up for, Athena, and I set up the CloudFormation template and the crawler. What's next?
So if you really want to see into your cost, so if you haven't spent any money yet, you might want to spend time setting up your organization, setting up your account structure. I think we spoke about this last time, where a good account structure is things like having organizational units, having accounts set up to contain an entire environment such as production or development, or an entire application. Kind of spend time doing that. If immediately you start spending loads of money and you want to see what's happening, I'd recommend setting up one of the cost intelligence dashboards to give you an insight. You can use tools like Cost Explorer, which are native, which will give you a good granularity of data. That's something I think you also need to enable. But getting the Kudos dashboard set up early means that you have access to that data, and you kind of set that as your normal tool to start accessing information and start seeing trends.
What about Control Tower? Since it sets up a number of these things automatically for you, I'm not sure. Actually, I have to check to see if it sets up Cost Explorer. But Control Tower for deploying out your accounts, and now you're having the visualization of it. Does that come into play here? And should I do that whether I'm a small startup or a huge enterprise?
Well, every startup, I assume, wants to be a huge enterprise eventually. So you might as well start for success. So set it up. As long as I think being mindful of if these things cost money. Don't quote me on if Control Tower does, I can't remember. But have a look and see if these services are going to help you, and think about where you're going to be in 5 years' time. You don't want to have any regrets of things you haven't set up. And that's one of the common things that we see with customers is they do lift and shift. They kind of hit the ground running and they haven't done any of these small tasks first. And then it means they're trying to put out fires. They're having to retroactively do things. They have to spin up a whole nother organization to move things again over to the setup correctly. So kind of read the documentation, see if you can get access to any experts in AWS, but have a look at best practices for setting up an organization. And definitely things like Control Tower will help you down the line.
Steph, set up for success, and that seems to be a theme. You and I are actually talking about this offline, is what are some of the things that you should do before you actually get started? If you're a startup, you already have an AWS account. I understand going and implementing these are a little bit of a concern. Control Tower has come a long way. When it first started out, you couldn't pull in existing accounts. You had to start net new. Now you can actually import existing accounts into it. There are some things you want to work through and work with your SAs at AWS to make sure you implement it correctly. But I think having you think big, right? You're a startup. Everybody wants to be big. You might as well plan to be big. I don't know the exact cost. I don't think it's actually much, because the resources it's using, it's only if you have the alerting turned on, like AWS config. If you're utilizing that might be a little bit of stuff, but maybe some gateways that are implemented. But I think the cost is minimal versus the control that you have for the environment, because you'll have your billing account, you have your whole organization, and you set yourself up for success.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, Steph, after that, what's next? I mean, what are some other things that I might be able to do to keep an eye on my account, to be aware of cost expenditure, things that are unknown to me? I remember even a startup or an enterprise, there's one person with multi hats or multiple people. Not everybody knows what's going on.
So like, I was just pulling up the blog that I was writing, because I was like, what is key to this? Because I was like, I've spent some time thinking about it, and definitely organization is key. I think the ownership thing is probably the next thing I would think of, or having a strategy. So it's not necessarily seeing data, but like we're saying, about thinking about how you expand over time, have a plan of who's going to own what and how everything kind of sits together. It's similar to tagging strategy. Maybe we can go on to that. But I like to think of it as not necessarily tagging. The whole thing around tagging is people get really stressed about it and they become obsessed with the idea of tagging. And I think I said this last time, but I'm going to start pushing to have more of like an ownership strategy. So tags are just a way to get data. They're not the be all and end all, but they're really important if you need to understand who has ownership of what. So if we go back to that account structure concept, that everything in an account is owned for a single project, for example, you can tag the account in organizations with metadata that's powerful to you. It doesn't mean you have to have everything. You can start small and add over time. It means that when you move accounts, they can kind of inherit tags from OUs. It's a powerful way of being able to see what's going on. And when it comes to looking at things like your cost intelligence dashboard, or even when you're trying to do reporting and things like Athena, if you have that metadata already set up, you could just pull that into those services and allow you to divvy up costs. Or when it comes to QuickSight, if you want to do your cost intelligence dashboard, you can use things like row level security, which is something that we're building at the moment for a plugin for the CID dashboards, which is cool. But yeah, having that data kind of set up at the start and decide who has ownership of what, not necessarily a person. I would maybe go against putting people's names against stuff, because people leave companies. And then if you've got someone's name against it, when they leave and you forgot to change it, there's just kind of this account floating around with all this money being spent on it. So maybe you look at teams or kind of groups that are associated to it. I hope that kind of answers your question. I kind of went on a tangent.
No, that answers a little bit. I want to touch on that, because you and I talked about tagging, and probably about a couple of years ago, tagging was like the biggest thing. Everybody's like, oh, you got to tag everything and anything. You mentioned on one of our calls, or actually our last podcast, is that somebody mentioned to you, is like, well, if I own the entire account, it's dedicated to this team or whatever it is, why do I need to tag everything? I got a question for that. Is that I have a team, let's just say optics team, right? That's my team.
Right.
Steph deploys out some stuff. Alex deploys out some stuff. How do you know who owns what? Are you just saying that, how are you responsible for it, and make sure that you're not deploying out too much or somebody else is not deploying out too much? Do you think you should be tagging to that so you can visually see that within the dashboards?
Yeah. I mean, if you have a shared account, so for example, we do have a shared account, but we don't care about who's spending money in it, because if we're going to charge it back, say in the world of Amazon, it would go back to like the optics group. So It's kind of irrelevant to who it is. If we needed to do chargeback for that account and we had to share an account, then you should tag it. So it's all about thinking about what the end goal of your tags is supposed to be about. In that case, if we all started deploying into one account and we had to know who did what, I would say add in, using your organization, add tag policies in to make sure people add the tag owner, for example, or even push people to use infrastructure as code and make that tag a variable. So when I'm deploying stuff, I don't have to constantly remember to tag my own name against services. It will just do it automatically for me. So kind of push people towards that. People have this idea of tagging in their head that they have to sit there and manually type it in every time. I want to remove that and either do it at the high level or do it at low level, but automatically.
Automating tagging is probably one of the best things. I remember when we had to do it through a Lambda function. Anytime something was deployed, it figured it out. It added a tag on the owner who created it. Now there's a lot of automation built into it. Infrastructure as code. I like the idea of having it in a variable. Whoever deployed it, their tags on their names automatically added, and it's pretty good. There's a lot of other benefits to tagging it, not just for who the owner is, but for the department, chargeback, showback. If it's a production system versus an actual dev system, separate accounts, or one single account, and you need to monitor all of it. Plus, you get to look at it in the cost explorer, but then also your data lifecycle depends on all of your tagging structure. So I think tags are still huge, but the right way of using and implementing them without spending a lot of time is key.
Yeah, and I think it just all boils down to, why are you tagging? And people, it's like that question I always ask people, like, do you need that? It was quite abrasive of a question sometimes, but to give people a justification of why they're putting this extra work in, there needs to be a good reason. And if you can simplify it by taking it to a high level, then do it that way. If you have to tag every resource, make sure that people are understanding what they're supposed to tag and the format for it. So things like cost categories allow people to be a bit more flexible on this now. But even like if you're going to be using it for policies and things like that, set conventions that people understand and set kind of tag policies that allow people to do this easily. Because that's another big problem, is that people don't tag because they build things quickly, or they're trying to push things out the door because they've got pressure to deploy things quickly and fast and highly available, and they think, oh, I'll tag it later. And this means that things get kind of left behind and kind of lost to the world about why things have been created. And so just encouraging them on explaining to developers why they are tagging to make them understand it. And for example, if you say to them, okay, we're going to monitor your spend, to identify your spend and your ownership, you need to make sure you tag anything. We don't want you to get any blame for anybody else. We don't want you to get any praise of anybody else. Make sure you tag your stuff. They'll understand why it's important. Whereas if you just yell at people for not tagging, they're like, I didn't know how to tag in the first place. So that was a lot of words, but just if you're going to input tagging policies, make sure you educate people on what tags they need to do and why they need to do it.
I agree with you. And you're starting to go with the IAM policies, but that's actually key with tagging, because it goes all along with the cost, is that sometimes you have an instance or two for security purposes as well, but you can put it in a policy that says any instance with this tag can't be deleted, terminated, touched, modified, or deleted. There's a key part for your tagging. It all goes around with security, but it also implements a cost feature where they can't touch a resource or delete it, because I don't want it changed, like the instance type. I don't want you to change anything else on this instance, but tagging is huge. Now, Steph, I'm going to jump over one thing we didn't mention, and I'm curious as to what are your thoughts on it. Budget alerts.
What about them? You can't just say budget alerts.
Oh, okay. Well,
they're good. Do them.
I really appreciate it. Thanks for joining.
What do I think of budget alerts? Okay, so I was watching years ago when I started getting into FinOps. I remember watching another cloud provider's conference. I won't say the cloud provider, because we're not allowed to speak of other ones at Amazon. And so I was watching their conference, and there was someone doing a cost chat. And this guy said that overnight someone had accidentally spent something like $10,000 on some services that they spun up, and they didn't know about it for like another week or something. And I was like, oh my God. I was so scared that we were going to do that somehow. And so then I started to look into budgets and things like that and set them up for our organization, for some of the big linked accounts, to advise developers to set them up for their linked accounts and explain why this was key. And it did make me feel safer. It makes me feel safer on my personal account, which I shouldn't be spending more than like $1 on. And so I have budget alert set up for that. So yeah, another thing, great point, is to, when you first set up your accounts, estimate your spend. It could be wrong. You might go straight over the top, might go really far down, but take a guess. Use the pricing calculator to estimate your resources and then set a budget and set a forecasted budget. So it will alert you in advance rather than too late. You want to kind of get ahead of the game. And if you notice some servers that have been spun up that will go over your budget. But yeah, definitely please set up budgets. We don't really want to get calls from people sad that they've overspent and they didn't realize because some, I don't know, graduate spun up some massive instance when they were doing a training that they were trying to learn from.
I set them up for my personal account. Now, being that I'm independent, I'm keeping an eye on my expenditure, and I wanted to make sure that I didn't go over a certain budget. So I'd be like, all right, typically I spend maybe $40 a month in my AWS account. So I'm thinking, all right, let's just go 75 just in case. I have 10 days left of September, and I'm like, I hit the 75 threshold. I'm like, what the heck's going on? Oh, that's right. You purchased some additional domains. Yeah. All right. So we'll that's a one-time thing. But it was great because I opened up my email and I got this alert. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to hit over. If I hit like 100, I'm like, wow, what the heck did I leave running? That should not be there. But I was doing some tests. I was doing some labs. I had some EC2 instances running up for a couple of days because it would take me more time to deploy them than the cost of actually running them for a couple of days. So I kind of balanced things out, but I think budgets, it works. It was key. And I set up a Slack notification as well, integrated. I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. I think it's a good visual way to get quickly notified. And if it's on the weekend, I think Slack might be the best way for people that'll see it come into a group chat for those who are monitoring it, and email for those who want to get to it, obviously, and then you get in and resolve the issue.
Yeah, definitely. The Slack integration is something that we see work well with a lot of teams, especially because, I mean, I'm sure your inbox is the same as mine. It's full of emails that just kind of get ignored. And that always used to happen as well. When before the Slack integration would happen, I definitely know people would just get the emails and just be like, oh, it's not my problem, especially when the ownership is bad. So going back to what we're talking about, if you can filter through to say like these accounts belong to this team, you can point the notification to them rather than to everybody, because then people will see it and just ignore it and assume that's not mine. But yeah, the anomaly section as well, and budgets, something that Savannah and my team talks a lot about, and I always pull her into conversations to chat about it, is very impressive. And yeah, just please set them up. Go today. Go see if you've got one set up. And I remember getting one when we thought we'd spent like $1 million or something crazy overnight, and I really panicked. But it turns out it was like some retrospective tax charges or something, and I didn't. And I was like, okay, this is fine. But the budget worked.
Emails, you said you got all these emails and they kind of get blurred out. Oh, somebody else will get to it. And as a distribution group going on that, I actually want to touch about it, is that when we talked about the account structure of setting up for success, you recommend a group email rather than an individual email when you set up these accounts, like billing and security and everything, and they go to everybody in a group. In case somebody leaves, you don't have to change the root user's email address. It's much easier now than it was a couple of years ago for changing that, but is that key as well? I mean, filling out all your billing information on your organization, making sure you have all the right contact information in there, and that you can reach out to these individuals, but also having it in organization structure. Now for a quick interruption. A huge shout out to our friends at Veeam for sponsoring this episode. Veeam Backup for AWS can easily protect all of your Amazon EC2, RDS, and VPC data. Wait a second, they can protect my VPC data too? Yep, that's right. Simplify AWS backup and recovery while ensuring security and compliance. All right, now back to our episode.
Yeah, I remember we always created a new email address to have, I can't remember how we did it. We used to create a new email address associated to an account, so it was never anybody's name, because it happened more than once people would leave, and so that's what we used to do at KPMG. And definitely for your settings for when you create that account, I feel like people just do that. They get excited about Amazon, and they want to jump in and they want to create an account. I'll just put my name. I'll put my Amex. That's what someone did at my last company. And then we absorbed their account, luckily, and got it under our organization. But it was just some guy was just paying for it for months. I don't even know if he knew what they was paying for. But yeah, that happened. So yeah, go and check how your accounts are set up. I'm not a security or a kind of high level organization expert, and so I would recommend checking out the other resources that we have on this to make sure you get the best bet. But I feel that using people's names and using people's actual email addresses is not the way to go.
Nice. All right, Steph, before we wrap things up on, some of the cost savings and information that's out there and a valuable resource like yourself to give everybody some insights on how they can optimize their environment, is there anything else that you think folks should do when setting up this account, or even if it's existing?
I would say the little things, if you can set up something like Compute Optimizer and export that data regularly, just because it's one of those things that we see, and the same for S3 Lens at an organization level. It's one of those things when you start having a conversation with a customer and they really want to optimize, and then you tell them to go and do this thing, and then they have to go and enable something, and they're like, oh, now we've got to wait 2 weeks or something for the data to come through. It could be just something that's annoying. So these services are free, just go and turn them on. And then you could take advantage of things like in the cost intelligence dashboards, there is the cow dashboard, cost optimization dashboard, COD dashboard, sorry, wrong lip. Cow is something else. So many animal
From cows to clouds.
There's so many, oh my God.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
you
God.
Just put that right there. I'm gonna go off. Wait a second. So the Compute Optimizer, can you let everybody know what that is and how it can help them?
Yeah, sure. So it's a great service that uses machine learning to look at your instances to see if you can optimize them. So it doesn't just have to be a cost optimization that will showcase instances that are provisioned correctly, over provisioned, and under provisioned. So that means that you might have services that are too small and you need to make them bigger, or that they're too big and you can right size them to make sure that you are spending the actual amount of money that you need on a service. So they're looking at EC2 instances, auto scaling groups, Lambda functions, and volumes for services that you can look at. And it's a really useful tool, especially for developers, because you could go in and see, if you were to choose, it gives you a bunch of options on what servers you can change sizes to, and if you want to include Graviton or not. And you can then click on that and see what would happen to your kind of metrics. So your CloudWatch metrics have a current kind of status line, and then if you move to this server, another kind of status line to show you the actual impact of it. So you can choose more accurately than just saying, I'm going to guess that I need this size. So yeah, that's a really useful tool. We recommend a lot of people kind of use that. And then the dashboards that sit on top of this data, we basically have the collector lab, which allows you to go and grab all this data and put it in an S3 bucket to create a data lake, which I will be discussing when we do AWS Fest, or it might have already happened. I can't remember when this goes out.
I'm going to try to get it out this week. If not, it will have already happened, and folks can follow some links in the description below, because Steph will be joining us on Optimize Your AWS Fest, where she'll be talking about this.
Yes, so you can check this out. But the summary is you put all this data into a centralized place, and then you put these dashboards over it. And what the dashboards allow you to do is collect all your accounts together. So if you do own several accounts, you can kind of group them together, but also help you make more impactful decisions. So Compute Optimizer gives you all the recommendations for all your services. But say you have 20 kind of T3 smalls, and it gives you recommendations there. There might only be like small savings, but you might have some massive machines that you could make bigger savings on. So you can kind of control the window of where you could save the most to spend your time wisely. Because if you're only going to save 5 cents a month on a server, it may not be worth your time doing that and spending your developer time on it. Whereas you can save a lot more money on a server. I would recommend doing that. So yeah, check out the well-architected labs is where all of this stuff sits.
Steph, this is really interesting that you mentioned it, because I just released something on social media today about instance types for cost savings. I didn't mention the Compute Optimizer because that's in an upcoming video. This is just a generic one of, hey, listen, do you know that instance types are key? Because AWS releases new instance types all the time, and newer gen is cheaper than the older gen, and you might want to take a look at those to move forward with them. But I did note that everybody should do their testing before moving forward and changing anything for their application. But if you make it really kind of, I guess hardware agnostic, then you don't have to worry about it. But there's a huge amount of cost savings on changing these instance types from one generation to another, or in the same instance family, but getting more power for your buck. I mean, the savings is there. Everybody's so used to like T2 micro or T2 nano, and then you go and you grab those, and those are the older ones. It's like T4, T4G. I mean, look at some of the newer ones. They're cheaper, faster, and more powerful.
Oh yeah, definitely. Because we want to get people off of the old infrastructure so that we can replace them. That's the big thing, is so that we can get faster and more efficient machines to do the work for you. And so we want to encourage you to move to the newer ones. And so that's things like Graviton, is about, depending on your service, about 20% cheaper. It really ranges, 40% price performance on EC2. But we want to encourage you to go to the ones that are not only more kind of efficient so that they're cost efficient, but that are have a better use of energy, so they're more sustainable. So Graviton you don't use as much power to do as much work, so they're greener. So we want to push you towards those kind of things. And they come out quite a lot, so just be aware of it. As you said, be agnostic to the infrastructure, but also make sure that you're going back to what I mentioned earlier. Try and use the infrastructure as code to deploy things, and use auto scaling groups, so that when you make these changes, when you go from a T2 to a T4, whatever, you just have to change a number and then let it kind of push out into your deployment. You don't have to manually go and snapshot things or change the instance type or all these manual processes. Make it as easy for you to stay up to date as possible.
Nice. Thanks, Steph. Steph, anything else you want to add to folks for cost savings?
I'm trying to think of this anything.
Or anything off the top, whatever's on the top of your mind.
I just generally. I'm trying to think. I think just generally, like, keep an eye on what you're doing with your spend, and don't be try and keep an eye on what you're doing for spend. Try and automate as much as possible. And invest the time in doing that, and invest the time in kind of setting things like KPIs or tracking or dashboard time. And when you have discussions with your developers or your stakeholders, make cost a part of that discussion. So many people talk about security, as you should. Security, number one, obviously, but highly available, all that kind of stuff, efficiency. But bring cost in. Every time you do a security report review, just do a cost one. I always think they should be put together because they're two of the pillars of AWS and they impact your business a lot. If you get hacked, it's going to cost you a lot of money. If you spend an additional $1 million on servers you didn't mean to, it's going to cost you a lot of money. So I'm not exactly equating the two. They're different. Don't come for me onto Twitter. But I just think that it's a way of tracking your costs, kind of seamlessly add it to your security practices, and you should be able to stay on top of your spend.
I think bringing all the right stakeholders into the room whenever there's a discussion or a review, like one person from each of the, department's heads, security, cost, operations, your performance, reliability, all of them, you bring them all into the same room, regardless of the actual topic. Well, you're looking at security, bring them in there because it affects all of them. If you have your, cloud adoption framework and you cost center of excellence, you're bringing them in and everybody has ownership of the changes that are being made and awareness. That's pretty much.
Definitely.
All right, Steph, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. It's been a fun conversation, including the beginning.
Definitely. Thank you so much for having me back. I mean, I know you've got my blog that I'm writing on the other side of my screen. I'm like, did I forget anything? But yeah, this is, I think some people are joining the cloud, and even those that have been here for a while still can utilize some of these services and advice.
Yep, definitely. Everybody, Steph Gooch, commercial architect at AWS. My name is Jon Myer. Don't forget to hit that like, subscribe, and notify, because guess what? We're out of here. And Steph, just for you, Alexa, turn off the podcasting lights. Okay. Come on, say something.
He wants me to say how cool it is. It's awesome. I need to get better lights. End of the podcast. Steph needs to invest in lights.
Alexa, Stephanie would like to purchase some lights.
Amazon's choice is G40 globe string lights with clear bulbs. 25 feet, black. It's rated 4.5 stars.
What did she say?
She's telling you she's suggesting some lights for you. I gotta put these in.
That's excellent. I was watching a TikTok the other day and it was like people in a meeting and then they were like, oh, how can we mess with this person? And then they were like, oh, Alexa, buy or add this to my shopping list. It was something ridiculous. And then mine did it. And I was like, God, where's the shopping list part of the app? Because I never use it. I'm surprised mine hasn't chimed in. Oh, Chime. It's a good pun.
Chime. That was good. pretty good. I had Jeff Blankenberg on, and we had to mute our devices because we said the name so often that it was coming up. I was like, ah, darn. I did a pretty cool one for the beginning. I was like, Alexa, announcement.
What's the announcement?
Welcome to the Jon Myer Podcast.
Announcing.
Welcome to the Jon Myer Podcast.
Oh, you're like my dad, who loves to do announcements when I go home. Like, it's just my mum and him at the moment. I'm just like, who are you announcing to? Just yell downstairs.
Was that a dad joke?
No, it was just
I'm
me.
just
No,
kidding.
that was just me saying you're like my dad. We've
Yes.
come full circle.
I was like, wait a second, is she going with a dad joke? Are you saying I'm old?
No,
I'm
you're
just
like my dad. My dad loves his Alexas. He tells me about ones he's gonna buy, and I'm like, okay, cool. Invest in Amazon. That's good for me.
I have them in my kids' room, and their lights, all their LEDs are actually powered to it. And
Oh,
one
cool.
of them's name is Baby Yoda, and the other one is Stitch, and because they each like different characters. So we say, turn on them. I have my outside patio lights on it. I have bar lights on it. I was like, man, I can walk outside and just tell her to turn them on, and everything goes on.
Yeah, it is really like when I have a couple of lights and smart lights in my living room, and when I do it and my friends are over, they're like, oh, and now they're bored of it. The first time it was cool, and then
Yeah.
we spent like half an hour doing the like colors, and then we're like, Steph, it's really annoying. And then they just turn the light on by the thing, and I'm like, no, now it's off, and Alexa won't respond.
My son's room, the switch is always on. So when somebody comes in there and they try to use the switch, it's not working. And when you tell her to turn on the lights, it takes 2 times to say it because it has to kick back in. And it's like, I just want to turn on the switch. And it's like,
you need like a sign that says like, this is an Alexa household. Please use your voice rather than switches.
Here's a list of commands you can use. Post it up. All right, I'll stop recording, by the way.
Okay, I forgot.